took me quite a while to get this build slash guide going. Sorry about that. A lot of people had been requesting specifically for this weapon, and yes, it is one of the coolest weapons, one of the coolest looking weapons in the entirety of the DLC. I can understand a lot of people wanting to use this. But there was just too much going on. Anyways, what's so special about this specific weapon? In a DLC where we have a whole bunch of really powerful and broken weapons, what's so special about this particular one? The DPS, it's actually pretty amazing if you use it with having something very specific in mind, and that is the explosions of everything. You will see that most of the time on the gameplay that I have for you right in here in the background. We're using heavy attacks, and that's mostly what you're supposed to be doing with this weapon. That's when this weapon is going to shine. You should always, at all times, use this for your weapon, especially because of one specific Fable arts that we're pairing this, that is going to furthermore enhance the stagger capabilities that this weapon has, but also, not only that, the damage on itself as well. It also has high and lots of mobility because of it's just you traveling back and forth through the map. We'll talk about the weapon moveset and why and how is it that we want to be using this weapon for. One of the downsides of the weapon, it's not that much of a downside, it's just something to have in mind, is that this is a boss weapon. So you're going to have to use the Guardian, I believe the Guardian Ergo, and you cannot get that until pretty advanced in DLC. As a matter of fact, after you get to that boss, you have like a very small section until you reach the final boss. So you have to go through the first area, which is the Kratzu, and then you have to go through the underground facility, and then you also have to go through the carnival area, and then you also basically you have to go through the entirety of the DLC until you reach this weapon. So that's a bummer. Remember that if you're playing on New Game Plus, they added a new patch where you can access DLC on Chapter 5, so that's why I advise, if you're doing a new playthrough, my advice is that you immediately go on Chapter 9 to get the DLC going, so that you can still enjoy this DLC weapon through chapters, the rest of Chapter 9, 10, 11, 12, so that you can at least get a value in usage for this weapon. So first and foremost, what we are going to have right in here, there's a couple of routes that you can take for this weapon. This is a weapon that mostly is going to be for a motivity build. But because it has a B scaling, but it also has C scaling and technique, so while it could be like a nice weapon for a quality build, there's much better weapons for quality builds out there. So what you want to do is add a motivity crack handle that is going to raise the motivity scaling for your weapon all the way to A, meaning that this is just a monster when it comes to building your character through motivity. Now we need to talk about the actual weapon. First and foremost, we have like the basic attacks. This is a great source, so you have those wide slashing attacks right in there. But what really shines about this weapon is the heavy attacks. So if you do a heavy attack, it's going to do that little explosion with the actual blade of the revolver, because as you can see right in here, the weapon is actually a revolver, and the explosions that you're doing, they come from here. So this is basically Lionel Squall weapon from Final Fantasy. But anyways, if you follow that heavy attack, it's going to shoot back and plunge you towards the enemy. If you charge the heavy attack, it's very useful for enemies that are very aggressive and you actually want to get some distance against them, because it's going to pull you backwards, it's going to allow you to dodge by movement, and then you plunge back into the enemy, so you have that gap of distance between you and the enemy before they actually deal damage to you. However, have in mind that if you're fighting an enemy that has huge tracking, and that's not going to be that good for you. But then again, this is very fast, and this is very fast. My advice is that you always use that, because you're not only getting damage from the blade on itself, but also from the explosion. Now, if we take a look at the Fable odds of the weapon, that's when things get interesting, because we have the full salvo, and then we also have the strengthened bullet. The full salvo is going to be this specific attack that I do not think it's that great. Like the damage that you can reach in here, if you compare it to different weapons that we have covered for the DLC that we have already built here in the channel, like we have covered weapons here in the DLC that have like 8 to 10k damage just by a single usage of your weapon art. So this is minimal damage. However, what weapon bullet salvo does is that it buffs your weapon. We're going to take amulets that and P organs that buff these things as much as we can. But while your weapon is glowing, it's also going to increase the damage of the explosions. So if you have this right in here, you will notice that that was just 2k damage just because that was actually cumulative damage from the previous attack. But if we actually charge right in here, it's 1300 damage. If we charge this and then we follow right in here, we already have that 2k damage right in there. This is also going to improve this attack, but I still that's that you see that it's 3k damage. And now that it's respectable damage, I think that it's nice, but I do not think that it's worth using 3 Fable slots for that, when you can just be buffing your weapon through the entirety of the times that you're fighting and then you continue attacking. So this is in reality what I advise for you to use. Always have your weapon buffed. Do not use the other weapon art, because this is not only going to increase your overall DPS and how much damage you deal, it's also going to increase how fast you get those fatal attacks, so that you can stagger enemies and then you can continue with your assaults. Your fatal attack is also going to be more deadly whenever you have the bullet salvo active. There's a couple of talismans that I like to use with this build slash weapon, and that is going to be, well, the most important one is going to be the Storyteller's Amulet. This is something that you get on the DLC as well, and increase the Fable charge amounts when attacking. It is very important for you to always be regaining back your Fable, because you always want to have your weapon buffed. So this is very important. The rest of everything is just random stuff that I use generally on my builds. The Patience Amulet to increase my stamina recovery speed, that's just something that is going to be useful for every single one. And then the Carrier's Amulet, so that you can be using the heaviest frames possible, and also the liners as well, because they get very heavy, especially once you reach the New Game Plus areas and the new versions of the New Game Plus. And then right in here you can just have whatever that you would want to have. I have right in here to increase the weapon attack damage in proportion of the number of Fable slots. For the stats, this is just a pretty straightforward motivity slash aka strength build. Remember that you start getting you have a soft cap on 40, so high level characters can definitely go higher than 40, but remember that you're going to have diminishing returns. This is the maximum potential damage that you can get while still being able to focus on vitality, vigor and capacity. I advise for you to do not neglect capacity, because if you're not using the proper linings and the frames and the actual accessories, you're going to have a hard time on such a very difficult game. So I do advise for you to not neglect capacity right in here. As for the Legion arms, the perfect choice would be for you to use the Cataclysm that you get from DLC as well. It has motivity scaling, meaning that your damage is just going to be quite amazing right in here, and it works as a perfect synergy, because this is distance that you can, like for example, use with some very cool and crazy combos whenever you're actually backing up from the enemy. So let me show you a good combo that I like to use more often than not. Let's say you're fighting a very aggressive enemy. What you want to do is that you want to charge your Cataclysm. Remember that your Cataclysm can be charged, so this is something that you can prepare before you actually fight anything and keep it right in here. But you do have a counter down there of the actual time that that's going to be active. So what you want to do is that you charge a heavy attack, you back up, and then you immediately use your Cataclysm right in there. You do lots of posture damage, but it's also a very safe way to fight, because you're backing up with your first attack. So that's actually kind of amazing. For some reason, people always ask me about the P organs, although this is something very general. I just can't go through every single thing and not make this video of a 30-minute video. I do not want to waste people's times. Just the overall advice that I can give to you is that you always prioritize your pulse cells. Those should be like a must. You should always be focusing focusing on getting as much pulse sales as you can, and that should be something that you should be doing immediately as you start your playthrough. So you will see right in here that we have the increased pulse sales. I do advise for you to, after focusing that, Fable slots, like add as many Fable slots as you can. I believe that we have one more pulse sales right in here. That should be a focus that you should have. And then I believe that the next Fable slot should be somewhere around in here. So yes, you have the Fable slot right in here. Also, the amulet slots, that's very useful. You want to have as many amulets as you can. And then I believe that there's also more Fable slots right in here. Well, no, actually 5, it's just the maximum of them. Ideally, you want to have as much Fable slots as you can possibly do. And when you upgrade your, when you decide what do you want to upgrade, at least specifically with this build, you want to increase the Fable odds effect duration. Because remember, and this is something that you should be prioritizing over everything else, because remember that the more time that your Fable remains active, the more time that your heavy attacks are going to be dealing, the more damage that you're going to be dealing with your heavy attacks. So I'd say that's a must, really. And you're pretty much going to be using, more often than not, the heavy attacks. You're going to be charging the heavy attacks. They deal lots of damage, they're always buffed, and they also deal lots of staggered damage. So if you spam them, you can be staggering the hell out of everything in front of you. And remember that since this is not an elemental weapon, this is a weapon that you can also be coating with an element. My advice is that you always, more often than not, if you're fighting something that it's not weak to it, your main thing should be electricity, because when you electrify enemies, when you have electrified enemies, they actually stagger faster and they receive more damage because of that. Anyways, if you like the content, like and never super appreciate it. Not only that you gorgeous beautiful person, you're indeed a gorgeous and beautiful person. Subscribe to the channel, join the Discord, have a beautiful day.